Oh way, bit of weirdiness going on here. Hey folks, this is Sam and we are in the Reloved Guitars workshop, and as you can see, a bird's eye view of, or a luthier's eye view, or whatever you might call it, of just tidying up, getting ready to do some work on different guitars. I'm trying a strange combination of things. It's a mixture, where's my buttons? It's a mixture of, oh no, flashing lights, full blast lighting, and head-mounted camera just for a laugh. Okay, so don't be too critical. Okay, so I guess as a warm-up, what I'm going to do is start. Well, I say a warm-up, but start with I suppose an easier of two guitars for this weekend, and it is this very nice Encore Blaster, and I guess you're seeing what I'm seeing now. Hopefully, I have no idea what the camera's pointing at, to be honest. I haven't got any way of looking at it other than using my phone. But we have here an Encore Blaster made by John Hornby Skews, as all the Encore Vintage and Fret King range are these days. And I've grown to like the John Hornby Skews production house, because in latter years they've worked with Trevor Wilkinson, who is a well-known British guitar designer, and together they've come up with a range of guitars which are definitely kind of aimed at the beginner, certainly in the Encore and the Encore Blaster series. But above that you have the vintage range, which I'm very partial to, because they are just superb quality guitars for the money, and they, in a sense, they very often outperform the big name things. So here we have, if you like, the midway, the missing link brand between the basic Encore, which is a little bit basic, although can be set up to play beautifully well still, and the vintage brand, which all of these. In all of these brands there are a range of basic shapes. So you recognise the Strat shape, there'll be an Encore in this kind of shape, there'll be an Encore Blaster in this kind of shape, and there'll also be a vintage, and also beyond that there'll be a Fret King version, which starts to look a little bit different around the headstock. But apart from that, they copy all the main shapes, but they do it brilliantly well. And this guitar, I've had one of these before and actually really impressed with the quality of it. It's a little bit plasticky. If you're looking for one of those guitars that feels like an absolute chunk of oak, solid wood or whatever, this feels a little bit insubstantial by comparison, around the body anyway, because it's quite light wood. But the neck is good quality, quite nice rosewood, and you get some really sparkly tones out of these three Guitar Tech single coil pickups here. And yeah, I've had one come through before through the workshop, and I deliberately went looking for it at the time because I wanted to see what this missing link was like, and set it up beautifully, and it plays beautifully, and it's a very easy guitar to play. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the full setup on this, and I will be aiming this guitar at a beginner, so somebody who's looking forward maybe to Christmas and having a guitar and an amp and a strap and a lead and a package, because that would be a good way to get this guitar out there as a sort of local sale. Maybe not so good as an eBay thing selling it. So without much further ado, I've no way right now of checking how this head-mounted malarkey works, but it's a bit of laugh, and I'm just trying to see. We can't get that too much closer when we're looking at things because the vocal range is certainly quite limited, but it's a different way of looking at things with the old torch giving you a clear look. I need to redo this board because there's a couple of things I haven't put on there yet, and I've got myself a whole load more of these things, so I think I'm going to have to just rewrite all these as much thinner strips. Of course, we're doing too many guitars and not enough room on the leaderboard of shame. And it's really there as a kind of an information thing to see if over a period of time we can build up make any sense of the guitars that play really well and the guitars that play rubbish. So just going to put this onto airplane mode. It's probably going to make a horrible noise for a second, so forgive me. Like I said, I don't quite know where this is pointing, so I'm going to sort of use a bit of poetic license. Funnily enough, the Tascam that does the audio recording for this is currently just it's actually velcroed to my sweater, which is probably not what somebody in broadcast media would think was an acceptable way of doing things, but because it's always likely to drop off at any moment. But hey, it's actually quite good for catching close-up vocal stuff. But I think if I were going to continue doing this, if this bit looked any worth doing, any good, then I would probably need to get some sort of lanyard, because just velcroing it to a furry sweater that you happen to have on is kind of a bit hit and miss. Okay, so as I say, I'm just going to see where my kind of head-mounted thing is pointed. It could be anywhere for all I know. In fact, for all I know, it might not even be recording. So I suppose it probably would be worth checking that part of it, wouldn't it? Hold on a sec. Oh yeah, that's recording. So a bit more filming. I've got the wire going around my ear to keep it out of the way. But hey, and it feels a bit funny because the whole thing's sort of wobbling about. But what the heck? Let's keep going. Okay, so what I'm doing here is just cutting the old strings off. I'll get a shot of these. We've got a couple more sets of strings here already, and we've got some more coming, so we won't be short of it. I think I'm probably only doing two guitars this weekend. I've got a bit of a backlog of bought guitars ready to do up and sell on, but I've also got some one guitar for another customer, and that's one that I do need to do this weekend, I think, because the guy who owns it will be wanting his guitar. Oh, it's always going to kill me. Bloody things, honestly. Yeah, he's going to want his guitar back, so it's his time. It will be time to get it back to him. And I'm going to use a pair of pliers to try and pull this out. So he's a student of a customer and friend of mine. So the one he'll be wanting it back. I think he's been without his guitar for a couple of weeks already now. While it's been making its way over to where I can do the work on it. Now I need a blade, and I can't find it all of a sudden. I'll put it somewhere. Yeah, so his guitar is a kind of heavy rock sort of thing made by Schecter, and it's a Sinister Gates. So it's very different. It's got the full sort of Floyd Rose thing. Okay, so with this one, as with all these sort of Strats, I'm going to take off the back plate first and put it in a container. And the reason for this is so I can get better access to the strings, but also give me a chance to look behind the cover and see what we've got in the way of springs and tremolo arrangement. Quite like this head-mounted thing. If it looks any good, I mean, I'm not at all sure it will, but it's sort of potentially a bit more informative than having the thing stood in one place. Anyway, we'll see. If it's crap, do forgive me, and we'll go back to a fixed camera position. One of the reasons, by the way, for taking the back cover plate off is that it just makes it easier to get those strings out at that point. And as I say, it's worthwhile having that off, because then you can adjust the tremolo if you want to, if you need to do anything with the springs. You can see this, it's set fully in, and I think I did that actually. And so the tremolo block is flat against the body, and that's really to just kind of take it out of play. Is it? Would I leave it that way when I come to sell it on? I kind of tempted to. For me, this kind of guitar, I'm not sure how well it responds to a tremolo. I might have a go at setting it so that it has some play in it. Just it depends on how well it stays in tune, and again that has kind of a mixture of how well we fix the strings at this end, and also the nut slots and things like that. So we'll see. If it is, we've got a tremolo arm in the house, so it seems a shame not to have it involved. Okay, so at this stage you may be able to see already how filthy this fingerboard is, and we can just, for sheer enjoyment's sake, we can get cracking on doing a bit of a clean up on that, using the naphtha, which is pretty easy to use and fairly effective. Doesn't require too much hard work, usually anyway. Occasionally you'll get a guitar where the stuff is so ground in that a bit of solvent isn't going to remove it, and actually you're probably going to need to use some very light wet and dry paper. Particularly you find that on very light rosewood, sometimes after many years of use you get a kind of build-up of shapes where the strings are down here, and it can be nothing you can do with a bit of solvent will clean that up. Okay, so again, if this doesn't look any good, then we're going to miss this whole chunk of the video for this guitar. But hey, that's the nature of experimentation. So while we're at it, while I'm just doing the stuff, I'd like to say thank you for the many people who have subscribed over the last few weeks. I don't really do any promotion work to get subscribers or anything like that. But it's just sort of an organic thing, which is. Oh, there's my cat under the shed. Let's see if he wants to come in. Who's out there? Oh, it's Sid. Hello. Yeah, it's mostly organic, and it's. I've got a day job, so you know it takes most of my time to do the work, and then I have some time. There is also some time required to get the videos uploaded and so on. So I really don't have a need to over promote anyway. Right now, because at the moment it's kind of more hobby based, but it's great that some people are finding the videos on YouTube, and thank you for signing up. And I hope, well, judging by some of the comments, most people seem to find it useful, and it's kind of satisfying too that some people make a point of saying they really like the philosophy of what I'm talking about, doing the as I do what I do, I suppose is the way to put it. And that's rewarding, and I think I've said plenty of times that it's absolutely not the only way of doing things. It's just a way I've learned from starting from scratch. I suppose part of what I'm doing it for is obviously because I love doing it, but also I suppose there's a message in that it's not rocket science or total mystery. Anyone who's got a bit of time and can be bothered to look online and do some experimenting is capable of doing this and making their basic budget guitar a hell of a lot better. So it's really rewarding if anyone gets something of that out of it and is able to improve what the instrument that they really enjoy spending so much time with. I think as guitarists, we have a very, very long-term, usually, and special relationship with guitars, and they're not just things. They're not commodities, really. For most guitarists, anyway, they're not. I guess some people treat them that way, but I think it's more than that. And people feel that their personalities, sometimes to a kind of crazy extreme, but it's it's a very personal relationship based on touch and feel and sound. So investing time in making it as good as it can be is a really great thing to do. And I also like the fact that if you do that, you're less likely to be dissatisfied. I guess it's like any relationship. The more you put into it, the more rewarding it's going to be, and the less likely you're going to want to chop and change. And I'm not here to kind of ruin the new. I'm not motivated by trying to spoil or reduce new guitar sales or anything like that. I really like the idea of kind of having longer relationships with these instruments, instead of just changing all the time. It's really cool. Anyway, so we are just a bit of a quick cleanup there. Just as we're doing it, one of the things about doing a cleanup is it doesn't necessarily need it. It doesn't make the world's most difference, but it does give you an opportunity to just look at things as you're doing it and see what's what. Okay, so for all I know, I'm looking in the window. This is still flashing, so it's recording. You may have seen another video, but one of the things I suggested was, you know, that when you take a neck off a guitar, there is, of course, some sort of torque setting that the neck has, that the bolts are under, and you know, you can either go and try and find the manufacturer's recommendations, or you can do a kind of common sense version. So let's start with our little torque screwdriver, and we'll go on a 4 and set it on the undo mode, and let's see if 4 will undo these bolts. Okay, so 4 will undo them. Let's try the next one and put it on 1 before 4. Let's assume that's 3, and try this one, and 3 will undo this. Let's do 2. 2 won't. So we know that 3 will undo all the a torque setting of 3 will undo all of the bolts on this neck. So that tells you that A, this neck wasn't very, very tightly bolted on, and yet it played okay. And it then tells you, I mean, we might want to write this down if we're doing several guitars at once, or we're likely to forget, and I'll do that just for safety's sake. So what do I know about this guitar? Well, I know that the neck bolts torque setting on the screwdriver equals 3 to undo. Okay, and let's say we're going to call it 4 to do it back up. Now, other guitars are set much higher than that. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know, but I tend to set them back where I find them, unless it's, you know, obviously going to do some damage. Okay, so the plate's off, and before I do anything else now, I'm going to carefully take out this, well, I'm going to try and take out this neck from its pocket. And it's a nice tight fit, and as I do it, what I'm really most interested in is, are there any shims in evidence? Little pieces of filler which are designed to kind of push up or reposition the neck geometry, and in this case there are none. It's a fairly clean slot, and there's none on here. There's a bit of build-up of sawdust, which actually will make a difference. That sawdust and bit of spare paint there will have an effect. So we may find a slightly different geometry when we put this back together again, but I don't think it will be a problem. Okay, so rule of thumb, when you take the neck off, look very carefully for signs of any shims. If you do have any shims, I would recommend, let's say there's one in there, you take your marker pen and you draw around the shim just in case it falls off, so you know where it will go back on. And if you've got time, maybe a little tiny bit of glue and glue it back in position. That way you won't mess up the geometry of this neck, and it will go back together again in a familiar position. You know, it won't hurt. You're free, once you've taken the neck off, you're free to make the geometry go in any way you choose. But if it was reasonable to begin with, then you might as well preserve the way it was set, because it may well have been, more than likely, was set that way in the factory. Okay, so we now have the neck off, and tuners all look good. There's a bit of goo on there that we can take with, probably take off with a bit more solvent. But the tuners on these Encore Blasters are pretty good. They're a bit plasticky. I mean, they're fully sealed, which is great. The little knobs here are chromed plastic, which look nice, but they're a little bit cheaper to the touch. But they work pretty well, and they're far better quality than those gruesome things that we have. In fact, I don't try not to keep them here because we've got so many of them. These grim looking things. I'm amazed how many guitars we come across when I'm looking on eBay that says, you know, quality tuners, and show a row of these things screwed in, with each one with 2 screws screwed into the Strat style guitar head. Now these are probably the cheapest tuners you can buy. Some Chinese made thing which is not even really sealed. These pressed units that fit on top. So any guitar that doesn't have those is pretty much a bonus in my book. If I do find a guitar with those old things on it, I will usually replace them with Wilkinson tuners, but they'll usually be the Easy Lock tuners, which are a bit better quality than those, even though they come from the same manufacturer. Right, so what are we doing in the setup? Well, if I can just pick this up without breaking or dropping my recorder. So the setup that we're going to do, or that I always do in the Reloved guitars. When I say we, I'm talking about me and Thomas, who's my stepson. Very often he'll get involved in doing this too, so it's not the royal we. I'm not being Her Majesty. Yeah, so the setup that I like to do with these always includes fret leveling, and you probably I've noticed since I've started doing this that not all, in fact probably not many luthiers or guitar techs do that. It is a long process, so they probably quite rightly charge quite a bit of money for it. So most luthiers I've seen offer a setup fee, and the setup involves kind of taking what you've got in place and making sure the action's as good as it can be at probably both ends, nut and bridge, and taking care of anything like pickup heights, possibly what else would be set up, just checking connections and so on, and you know, where necessary, maybe even altering the neck angle, or if necessary. But very rarely does a setup include taking care of frets. That's often charged for separately and called a fret dressing, and it can be as much as anything from 70 to 140 quid I've seen advertised. Now here at Reloved Guitars, my rule is that I don't do any setup without doing the fret leveling, and that is because, as you'll see here, experience has shown me that 100% of guitars, whether brand new, or straight off the shelf in the shop, 100% have around about, first of all, 100% have uneven frets. Of all the guitars that have uneven frets, a kind of an average is about 50, but you can see that many have above up to 75, 80, and some are even as high as 90. So the vast majority actually are up in the 75%. So that means that every single guitar you buy, almost regardless of how much money you pay for it, every manufactured guitar has uneven frets. And those uneven frets force you to accept certain limitations on the action. One of them is the lowness or the level of the strings. If you have uneven frets, you cannot reduce the string height, the playing action down here, below a certain point. And you don't get to choose that point. That point is chosen by the vagaries of the unevenness in the frets. So from my point of view, if you're going to do a setup, you might as well, or you should, do a fret leveling to begin with, because you know this is the heart of your guitar. It's the heart of your relationship with the guitar. I mean, of course you relate to the other bits as well, and they're important, but there's nothing more critical to the musicality of your guitar, really, and your relationship with it, than the frets and the neck. So part of my sort of mission to make budget guitars play the way they should, I pay full attention to this, and that's what we do on every single guitar, is do the fret leveling as a matter of course. Once we've got that done, then fret levels, we've leveled the frets, then we repolish them, reshape them and repolish them. Then we can put the neck back on, and then we're starting from a really clean slate, which in fact the guitar's never been in this position before, and as a result it's actually better than new, because we can now create a playing action that it could never have before, straight out of the factory or straight from the shop, because that work we've just done never gets done unless somebody like me will do it. That's why it comes with a cost, which is also probably why it isn't done by the factory or the shop, because they have to maintain their margins for buying and selling guitars, and unless the customer insists on it en masse, then things won't change. You won't find guitars that you buy in the shop or from online retailers will have this work done. But the good news is, if you do this work, you could take I don't know, I'm not saying how much this costs, but let's say you bought a guitar on eBay for 50 quid, a half decent Squire or something. If you can learn how to do this, you might put another 3 hours work into it, and it plays better than any guitar you've ever had, and you'd want to stick with it. It could be your gigging guitar, it would be so good. If you would pay someone like me to do it, I might charge you 60 or 70 quid for doing it, but it's still, for just over the £100, 110, £20 mark, you'll find you've got yourself an absolutely fabulous playing guitar that will be better than guitars costing probably 3 or 4 times as much, which are also coming out of the shop and the factory unset up. So anyway, it's by way of kind of explaining what we do. So I'm going to just launch into this bit, get started, and then I'll cut and move the different camera angles so that we can make sure that we're getting things, pictures, and if it's any good I'll come back and do this more often with the head thing, but right now let's go with, let's get on with this Encore Blaster. So part of the process is I'll stick the body down there, safe, and the first thing we're going to do before anything else is to protect the fingerboard, and I do that with masking tape. And if you're going to do this, you want to do it generously. You've got, fingerboard is, as I said, it's that heart of that relationship, and you want to get it right. So just chuck it on. Don't worry about scrimping on it. Make sure it goes right up to the frets and covers them. Now, you can see already that within a couple of minutes, or a few more frets, I don't know if you can see, by the way, there's quite a bit of fret wear on these. They're flattened off where the strings are moved. So very shortly I'm going to run out of, the frets are going to be too close together to use this tape, and I'm going to have to start cutting different thicknesses. And that takes a little while, but it's the only way of making sure that we cover the fretboard thoroughly. Okay. So I'll keep going for a minute, but when I get to that point I'll stop and move the camera and come back with miraculously all of this taped up. If you were to do it yourself, just lay out some strips of masking tape on a plank or something and use a straight edge and a sharp knife and cut yourself. I tend to cut a couple of strips, long strips, in half down the center, and then a couple more strips in thirds, and that does for all of these. Okay, so once I've got the thing on, I just pinch it around the back like this. Kind of keeps it in place, but it also makes it a little bit easier when we come around at the beginning, at the end, sorry, to take all this off, because it's surprisingly how difficult it will be if you just stick it straight to the neck and nothing else. Okay, right, so put that there. Grab a plank of wood, and you can see I've been doing previous ones on here, and just chuck all this old bits and get on with cutting some new bits. Right, and let's hope the head-mounted camera malarkey was vaguely useful. Okay, where's the stop button? Stop! Okay, so miraculously the Encore Blaster neck is all nicely swaddled in masking tape, which will keep the fingerboard safe throughout the fret leveling, reprofiling and polishing operations that are about to come. So I'm going to do a couple of things and then we'll get going. So the first one I'm going to do is going to just check the neck for straightness, and we need a straight neck before we do any fret leveling. John asked me why I didn't use a nice straight edge. I mean, you could either use one that runs across the frets, but that's slightly inaccurate because we know they're uneven. But you could put one on there and go, yep, there's a gap there, I can see the gap. I could even measure it if I wanted to. But my answer to that is actually I prefer to do it by eye. It's just the way I've learned to do it. and yeah, there's no reason why not. You can certainly going to tighten it up clockwise to take. It's got too much relief in it, so I want to take some, flatten it out a bit. Yeah, so it's something I've learned to do by eye, really, and if it's just a personal thing, but you could certainly buy a special slotted ruler, which is like one of these, but it has cut out slots which get closer and kind of closer together. It allows you to place them over a typical neck like this. Now, presumably those rulers you have to buy one per scale length, because or maybe the gaps for the frets are just wide enough to accommodate a couple of different common scale lengths. That's probably the case. But it allows you to put the ruler itself onto the fingerboard as opposed to the frets, and the frets go up into the slots. That's one way of doing it, and you can see very easily. But I do it by eye, and it hasn't been a problem so far. So I can tell after a couple of adjustments that this is now, if I can get my Allen key in properly, any second now this will be as flat as it's going to be, which is basically I've taken all of the neck, the truss rod tension out, and we've now got a neck that should be at rest because it's not being pulled on by the strings. And if it doesn't go any further than that, then it's with a straightforward truss rod that's in this kind of neck, then you don't have, it's only a one-way truss rod, so you can't kind of keep going that way and hope that it will, in our case, that it will continue to thingy. What's the word? Because currently I'm trying to make it arch, make it convex, or trying to take some of the bow out of it. But beyond a certain point, this is going to spin freely. Is that right? Hang on a minute, I'm getting confused now. At this point in time, it's the opposite way around. I'm actually going to put this under a bit of tension and straighten the neck out. I've just been picking up some slack by the feel of it so far. It's hard to describe this. I have a drawing here that I have to refer to because I always get it wrong. There we go. So when we're under tension and the neck is bowed, well, chances are we may still want to take some of the bow out of it if it's too much, in which case we'll also turn it clockwise. I can just get the Allen key in. Okay. Yeah, I have a particular blind spot for this clockwise, anti-clockwise thing. I don't know, it's like some sort of mental bypass. Okay, so I've got it just about absolutely dead flat now. So before you do any fret leveling, make sure your neck is completely straight. And now what I'm going to do, but it's not necessary that you do this, but it's just useful information for my leaderboard of shame, which, while I'm at it, I think I'm going to have to create a couple of quick entries, and I'm going to guess the width. In fact, I'm going to make the width one ruler width for each of them, but I've got a couple to catch up with. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to do this measuring thing. If you're using a fret leveling file like I am, it's designed to do all the frets on the neck at once. And let me just see what we've got here. We've got a Hagstrom 70%. This is last weekend's one. Hagstrom Ultra Swede came in at 70% uneven frets, which is, you know, a beautiful guitar, but that's pretty uneven. And then we had a Squire Strat Standard, came out at 75% uneven, and these are great quality guitars too. So you can see that there's no correlation between the quality of the components, which on both those guitars is superb, and the levelness of the frets. In fact, you might almost argue the opposite. So we have an Encore Blaster Strat style, and what I'm going to do is measure it, do a check, and then when I've got a figure I'm going to update that and stick all three of them onto the leaderboard. So the checking the fret levelness, as I say, you don't need to do it if you're going to do fret leveling, as I am with a file like this, because it does all the frets together. It doesn't really matter which ones are high, because you're going to take care of it without needing to check that. But for your information, or for my leaderboard, it's worth it can be worth using the fret rocker tool like this, which will help you determine which frets are uneven. So the way to do it is put this straight edge across only 3, no more, no less, 3 frets at a time, and then try and rock backwards and forwards over the middle one. And if the middle one is high relative to the ones either side, or one of the ones either side, you'll get a clicking noise, as you can probably hear here. And you can feel it and hear it at the same time. Then what it's telling you is that this part of the fret is relatively high to one or both of these sides. Now what we don't know is which. Luckily when we use a tool like this to level frets we don't need to know, because it does it universally. But it's just for our information. We do know as well that if we have relative uneven frets, or frets that are uneven relative to each other, we do know that that's going to cause problems with our it's going to limit us as to how low we can set the action on this guitar without doing this fret work. So I just kind of whiz along, identifying the relative high spots, and because it's relative you'll see some correlations between things. So that one appears to be high there and high at the ends of there, but it's clearly not. It's not that. It's probably well, I don't really know. It may well be that that is a high spot, or these are low spots. I don't know. But you'll see some patterns reappearing if you do it a few times. Now here's one that's really high relative to the ones either side, and I can sort of emphasize this by giving it a bit more of a heavy marking with my pencil, and that sort of tells me when I come to leveling, I know that I've really got to make sure I've got this level down. And you'll see that when we come to leveling, that this, where I've marked it heavily to show that it's really high or significantly high, you'll see more of the metal coming off this fret, while you'll see less coming off the frets all around it. So as we go up the neck, I have to change which straight edge I use, because obviously the frets get closer together and I only need to cover 3 at a time, and that's why the tool has 4 different length sides, and this one's quite significantly high as well, and it's sort of mostly in this middle section, but I kind of build that up too to show there's no harm in giving yourself a visual cue about what you're doing. Some guitars that we go onto the leaderboard here have quite a high number of uneven frets, like the Hagstrom, but they were all individually very mild, so there wasn't that much, you know, whilst it was rocking a little bit, they weren't that uneven. This one, you see the darker stuff shows, and you can hear it, shows some pretty significant differences in height. Whether it, as I said, whether it's one that's high or another one that's low is kind of neither here nor there for our purposes. We just know that relatively they're uneven, and therefore there'll be problems associated with that. Again, this one quite a bit on this side, and then a tiny little gap with nothing, and then a bit further down. So it's very easy to do. Let's check. Let's have a look. Let's keep going one more. We're very good at detecting the movement. That's pretty high as well. Again, this one following a similar pattern, a lot of height at the side and then a gap and then some at the other end. Now this, when you consider the way that frets are put into a guitar neck, it's not surprising that there's unevenness. If you think about it, a piece of wood has, or the rosewood fingerboard here, has a load of parallel slots cut with a very fine saw, whether mechanically or by hand, and then, God, that's high, and then you have frets that are snipped off from a coil or a reel of fret wire, and they're already bent, so they will have a kind of natural springiness to them. And then you, oh, this is really high, and no wonder problems here. Yeah, so then your job then is to press these already slightly coiled, curved frets into this neck, into the slots, and then glue them down and hope that they stay attached. And of course they will, they're all clearly attached and sunk into the fretboard, but they'll be sunk in at different in different ways, and hence the unevenness. As I said loads of times before in these videos, some people, when they've got one single problem, they solve it by tapping it with a little hammer, a soft hammer. True, you know, you may lower a fret by doing that. I don't do that ever, because I have a theory that that will only just, at best, you'll make a fret go further into an unspecified amount. So you may have made it lower, but you won't necessarily know whether it's in any way even compared to all the others. So at best you'll just get it in further. At worst, I suspect you'll be kind of stressing the wood. You'll be making the slot that the frets are sitting in weaker and bigger, because you'll kind of bounce the fret in and out with the impact, and possibly break the glue seal and all manner of other things. And on top of that, plus the fact that wood is springy, and the fret itself, because it's curved, is also naturally springy. So the whole thing, to me, kind of argues very strongly for not using a hammer. But that's me. So the method here, that I think a lot of people use anyway, and I certainly do all the time, is to accept that however these things are fixed in, they are fixed in, unless they're clearly falling out. But these are all fixed in, they're solidly in place. The sensible money is to bring them to a level from above and take off. And this is what we're doing. So you can see that we've got I think it's 21, but 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. I keep saying 21, it's 22. 22, we can't measure or check the first and the last one. So we're talking out of 20, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So a good round 70% again. So I think, you know, the overall average that I'm seeing for these for guitars coming through this workshop is, I would say, is about 70% of frets on those guitars are uneven, and all guitars have them. So 100% of guitars have uneven frets, and of those that have uneven frets, they have at least on average 70% of their frets are uneven. Pretty big deal when you know that limits you to how you can set your action. I'm going to cut 2 bits of paper, that's cool. And of course, if you haven't done this before, then you won't know until you've sort of felt the difference between your guitar the way it was before, and let's say your guitar the way it is after you've done this kind of fret leveling work. But the difference is immense, and the action can be set beautifully low. It can feel like nothing you've ever played before. And the reason it feels so good and so different is simply because we've put right the underlying problem, which is the uneven frets. And once we've done that, we can set the action where we want. Okay, and I'm just going to chuck these. I keep saying to myself I'm going to redo this leaderboard and put things in the right order. I will do, but I'm just putting them in there the way they are. As a placeholder. Right, let's get these spare pins in too. Okay, so we are ready to get into fret leveling. So 3 stages. First stage is to level the frets. Second stage is to reshape the frets so that they're not horribly flat and scratched, but they are rounded at the tops, and they look like they basically like the nice rounded arches that they currently look like. And then third stage is to polish them up to a very, very high quality shine so that they become smooth again and interact with the strings beautifully. Okay, so first stage of the process, leveling them. What we do to begin with is I'm going to get some slightly zoomed in specs on, and we're going to get a permanent marker pen, and on the top, just colour in the top of each of these frets, all of them, every fret on the neck, with a layer of black marker on the top. I will say this, and I bought some new pens which are a little less soggy and sponge-like. If you've got a very thick marker, what you can risk at this point, and it's really bad if you have a maple neck, but if you touch the masking tape here with the wet soggy marker, the paper will grab the ink in a kind of capillary effect and suck it underneath the paper onto the neck, onto the fingerboard. And I've been caught out a few times with that, and it's really annoying, because then sometimes all you can do is to sand it off. This stuff somehow resists solvents when it's on maple or lacquer. It's really, really annoying. So it's really important you can't really do this job very well without doing this, but if you do it, make sure, even if you have to spend a couple of pounds, go and get the right pen that I've just done here, which isn't too shaggy and too soggy, so you don't run that risk. Okay, now just a pre-file check. This is very, very destructive in the sense it takes off a lot of metal and you can't go backwards. So checklist for me is my neck level? Yeah, I've leveled it, and I've done that with the truss rod. Okay, the neck is level. That's the first one. Is it thoroughly protected? Yes. Have I marked it up with marker pen? Yes. So now I'm ready to do the basic leveling part. And to do this, we just start on one side or the other, and we slightly tip the fret off just to round the edges, and tip the file, and we just run down the neck with the file, and it just cuts away at the metal. And we want to smooth, not too hard pressure, all the way down, and move inwards in strips as we go. And I can see it taking off metal and depositing it on the masking tape. And we're coming now to this side, and we'll tilt the file a little bit to one side as well. So here we've got, you can see the metal it's taken off. That's what I mean by destructive. It removes material, and you can't go backwards on this. You can't put it back on now. So you don't want to do it too heavily, not too much force, and you want to stop and check. And this is what the marker pen was for. Now the marker pen will help me see the frets I've either missed or that haven't been touched because they've actually got a low spot on them. And now I'm just going to quickly look in. Sometimes you have to get the right light to see it, but I can see some frets that haven't been touched, and I can see some that are got loads taken off because, as predicted, they're so uneven. It's taking off. It's taking down a very high spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come the other way now. Same routine, but come the other way, and I'm going to do this to make sure that I cover touch every fret as I go, or every part of the fret as well. Okay, again, takes material off, and you brush it out of the way. And now I'm just going to again look in the right light for me. I've got 2 frets. I can see it's not touched. 3 frets actually. There's bits not touched, while some of the other frets nearby are really, really seriously flattened, relatively speaking. And that is because what we're seeing is that there is a real low spot on a couple of frets, and we're now making sure that everything comes down to meet that, to do away with that flat spot. So I can still hear a couple of clicking noises where I can see the flat spots. So I'm going to need to still carry on with this until I've got those flat spots taken care of. And this is where you've got to be quite brave and fearless, because you're still taking away material on your neck. And that's the challenge of this, is to bring all the frets down to the same level. And you can see that the phrase, the lowest common denominator, is one of those things, that concepts that really applies here. You are going to be chasing the lowest point on this fretboard. But there's no alternative. If you don't do it, you will have an uneven fret, and you will find that there will be choked or blocked off notes. So I'm pretty much there. I'm just going to turn this around and run it the other way, just very gently, just to make sure we've got absolutely everything. Sometimes it's quite hard to get the first or last frets in this process, so turning it round and approaching it from a different angle is quite a good idea, so that you put that sort of that pressure where the file is moving smoothly and cutting nicely. You can make sure that you get every fret has a taste of that. Okay, now obviously, if you found yourself running out of metal, then you are in a position, it's because your frets would be already so worn that there isn't enough metal to do this. On most guitars that I've done this on, I think I've only once run into a place where there literally wasn't enough metal, almost wasn't enough metal to carry on. But most guitars, you'll be able to get away with a couple of these treatments. Okay, so we now have all the frets lowered a little bit. All of them have a flat surface now on top, some more than others. The ones that have the biggest flat spot are the ones that were highest, and by contrast the ones with the smallest kind of filed area are the ones that were the lowest. But we've kept going until we've touched the lowest of the low. Okay, now we do the next stage. We're going to head into reprofiling, and to do that we need to now redraw a marker pen across the top of the frets. Now this time the marker pen serves a slightly different function. It's almost the same, its broad purpose is the same, it's to let us know our progress, but because we're now going to be filing each fret individually along across the neck this way, this is going to tell us a slightly different thing. It's going to tell us where we've cut or filed on the fret top, but in order to for us to preserve the levelness of the fret, we need to be able to reshape the fret, but without taking the top down any lower, and that's quite a challenge. So to do that we have a concave file especially for the job, called a fret crowning file, coated with diamond particles. And it will allow us to round off this fret, but as long as we stop before we wipe off or scrape off all of this marker pen, we can leave a very thin line strip of marker pen right down the centre of the fret, centre line, and if we can do that, it tells us that we've reshaped the fret but without taking it any lower, and that preserves the relationship that we've now got between all of them. Because if you just wanted to do a quick check, you'll find that all the clicking is now gone, all the frets are relatively level, and so we don't want to lose that. So we have to know when we need to stop with the fret crowning file. But it's pretty simple. It's a pretty effective way of doing this. So this tool comes from StewMac in the US, and it's not cheap, but it is a good quality tool and it's worth having. It'll last for loads of jobs. So I'm just going to zoom up a bit closer here. A little bit closer. So I've got a concave tool. I've got medium-sized frets, which I've got one edge for, and I've got another edge for larger jumbo frets. And I'm just going to use this file just to run it kind of under its own weight, and I run it up and down, backwards and forwards across the fret. What it's going to do is it's going to cut the shoulder down on this fret, which kind of brings it back into a rounded shape little bit by little bit. But what it also does is it leaves that little thin strip of permanent marker right down the centre line, just a hint of it down the centre line, like a pencil thin moustache, and I stop at that point because I know I've rounded the sharp edges, but I've left the top at the same height, and that's when I move on to the next one and do the same. So you can see it doesn't take much. It doesn't take, this tool doesn't take a high amount of skill to use, but you do have to be very alert to how it's cutting and where you need to stop. Because if you go too far and you use this tool to basically wear down your fret too far, then you've caused yourself another unevenness, which is sort of defeats the object of what you started out to do, which is to level the frets. Okay. So I've got quite a few guitars to be taken care of, but right now, this weekend, I've got this one, which I want to, it's a nice learner guitar, so I want to get this one listed, well in advance of Christmas, because it is a great gift guitar, this one. And it will be, of course, set up to play really, really easily for a learner, which would be very encouraging and motivating to keep on learning, rather than a horrible second-hand guitar with a high action which put anybody off. And then I've also got the Sinister Gates one to get into. I haven't been able to really find out in detail what about that wasn't right for the owner. I just know that he took it to another luthier and he did some setup work, but when it came back it still wasn't right. So interestingly, I haven't got much more information than that. I haven't spoken to the owner. I've only spoken to the owner's guitar teacher who passed it on to me. So it's quite a challenge to go at it cold and trust that I can, without even knowing what about it that the owner didn't like or wasn't happy with, that I'm going to somehow make it a better guitar for him. And that would be, in a way, it's a real test of the reloved guitar process, really. Because it's kind of saying, almost saying, well, no matter what's wrong with your guitar, this will make it better, which I have faith in that it will. But another part of me would really love to know what the hell it was that he didn't like, so I could be sure that I'll put that right for him before he gets his guitar back. But I'll have to go bravely into the unknown territory. Now, what I'll find is where I hit the frets which had the biggest flat spots, it's going to take a bit more working away with this tool to level them, to round them off, because they've got a considerably greater flat spot on top, which means there's more work to do to round off the surrounding area to get it back into a nice smooth hump-shaped fret. But that's, I've got the markings here that tell me that, which is great. And so we just kind of plod away and keep working with this very, very useful and helpful tool. Again, it's 70 or 80 pounds or whatever it costs ultimately with the postage from the US. It's not given me any problems at all, and it's worked perfectly since I've had it. So to be honest, even if it didn't last that much longer, it feels like it's already been money's worth. But I know that they do last a long time. So by all accounts, extremely worthwhile purchase. So we're just working away patiently, not pushing too hard on anything. Just working to take down the shoulders of these squared off frets and just end up with this lovely little Errol Flynn moustache down the middle. Or for those older folks here watching this, the Russ Mail. No, one of them had a Hitler moustache from Sparks, and one of them had a pencil moustache, I think. Anyway, it's the pencil moustache variety we're aiming for here. But once we've got it, we then know we're ready to start the polishing process. In some ways, each stage of this little process has its own challenges. I mean, over all of it is the one of being patient enough to do this job. if you're somebody who doesn't have that patience, you can kind of get frustrated and try to cut corners on this and end up with not a very good result. Particularly in the polishing part that comes up next, it takes quite some time to get it exactly right, and if you don't get it right, you'll carry through microscopic scratches into the final stage of polishing, which kind of you won't even notice until the point where you've put all the strings back on and somebody gives it a go, or you have a go at playing it. And what you'll find is that the strings will find the scratches that you didn't see immediately, and it will just feel terrible. And then you'll be trying to get some sandpaper or some rubbing blocks or fret blocks and fret rubbers, and you'll be trying to desperately sort of cure the scratchiness after the string has already been put back on, and in doing so you may, who knows, you may be creating more unevenness problems. So to avoid all of that, we want to make sure that polishing is thoroughly done in the sequence that it needs to be done. And you know, for all of this focus and hard work, the result is playing action that's fantastic, that you've never played before, or you've never had on your guitar before, and a playing feel that's effortless and that's a pleasure to play. And I always say that, given that you're going to how many years of fun you're going to have with your guitar, most people anyway, who wouldn't put that investment into it? Either learn to do it yourself or get someone to do it really well for you. Okay, that's pretty much the end of that process. So I'll just brush this off again. Perfect timing, hey hey. I did a bit of head filming, which is quite good fun. Yeah. So I'm just doing the Encore Blaster. The reprofiling bit done, polishing bit to come. I'm sort of warming up to the heavy metal monster guitar. So no band practice this Sunday, I don't think. Kind of glad in a secret way. Don't tell anyone. It'd be nice to have a Sunday evening off. Okay. So I'm going to stop this now, drink my tea, come back ready for the polishing. Here we are. We're at the next stage. Tricky stage, this. I'll talk to you for a second. Yeah, tricky stage. The job here is to remove all this heavy scratching, which is a couple of different grades of scratching, and smooth it all out without lowering any one fret more or less than any other, and ending up with perfectly level but beautifully smooth and shiny frets that you can just go on and play. Now, the tops of the frets are currently scratched. There's a little flat surface where we've left the black marker pen on here, and underneath the marker pen is a thin line of scratches that came directly from this file here, whatever that is. And I sometimes refer to it as zero grit. You know, it's the biggest, it's huge scratches. I mean, it's not even equivalent to any kind of paper, but let's call it zero grit, horrible big scratches. So the tops of all of these frets are scratched with 0 grit. The sides are scratched with 300 grit, which is the marks left by this. And we need to get rid of all of that progressively and where it's smooth. So the way I look at it is, you start with this, which is the default scratches you want to get rid of. We use as much 240 paper as is required to get rid of the marks left by that. And we also then use, I would suggest using, using a magnifying glass and some bright light to make sure we've got that, so we don't move past this grade of paper until we're absolutely certain there isn't a single tiniest little notch or scratch left from this device here. Then when we've finally agreed we've done that, then we go to an 800 grit paper until we've confident we've removed all the 240 grit. And then finally we end up with a whole sequence of what's it called? Micro mesh. No, micro mesh, which ranges from 1500. So we go 0, 240, 800, 1500, right the way through to 12,000, by which time we've got a good shine going on. And we either use our fingers at the higher grit levels or a shaped block to do it. And the important thing about this is to, really important thing, is to roll over the frets so that you don't just reintroduce a flat surface. So it's important to roll over the frets to keep that smooth, but it's also critically important to make sure we do the same amount on all frets so that no frets get lowered in relation to any others, otherwise we've kind of undone all the hard work. So just to get pretty much straight into this, I'm going to need close-up view glasses again, because this time I've really got to get this right. Just make sure I don't have anything shooting mobile phone signals. Yeah, we've got to really get this, critical to get this right. It's going to be a bit noisy on the video, but so we start with our 240 grit paper and our fingers, and we're going to wear this paper out until all the abrasive stuff is gone. And I'm going to press down and just let my fingers ride over each of the frets and try to concentrate on doing all of them equally. So don't stay any one spot on this more than any other spot. Now this will immediately start to deposit the abrasive material onto the fingerboard as dust and as a kind of brown, grey muck, and it starts to get dirty already. And we're just going to keep going, putting our fingertips into it really. I'm just trying to, wherever you can remember, to just do the whole lot kind of equally. So this does begin to get a little bit filthy, and it's also obviously why we needed protection on the fingerboard, so to be really thorough. Okay, so I'm just keeping going, using all of the abrasive potential of this paper, and you may have to over focus on the end of the guitar, either end, because the ends are really hard to get done. It's almost always the place where we end up leaving some scratches and have to continue working on. But by and large, I'm trying to give everything a sort of even coverage. Certainly I'm not going to stop in any one place and rub away with this paper, because at 240 grit this paper is more than capable of reducing down the metal on the fret and giving you a really big difference between the fret you're working on and the one next to it if you've just stayed in one place. Okay, so that's one piece of paper used up. Brushing the dust off somewhere near the floor. Brush it out another time, but preferably not somewhere near where we're going to breathe it straight in. So be careful with that, because it's not great stuff. Okay, now I'm not even going to look with a magnifying glass yet. I'm going to take it for granted that, in my experience, it's about 2 or 3 of these sheets we're going to need. What I am going to do on this one is I'm going to switch over to using the shaped block, because I really want to get in and out of these individual frets, and I can skip this thing down the length, kind of almost in the opposite direction how it wants to go. It gives me a chance to get quite hard pressure, but also get quite far down into the, up and over the frets, and then I can also move this around fairly easily. get to the very last one, so you kind of have to run right off the end to make sure you get to it. And switch the paper around a bit. So just to reiterate, I guess the principle here is in order to remove those big nasty old scratches, we are definitely wearing down the material, but we're doing it as much as we can evenly. So it doesn't matter if we take a couple of microns off this fretboard, as long as we take it off all of it, not just one spot. Now, I'm also all the while watching to make sure that the masking tape doesn't lift off the fingerboard. If it does, I recommend you stop straight away, don't hesitate, and cover it back up with a new piece of masking tape, because if you don't, it'll just cost you your fingerboard, and that sort of defeats the object of this. Okay, now is the time I'm going to get with the make with the magnifying glass, and you may not be able to see what I'm doing here too well, but I've got to get into whatever position is required to sorry, that's just not good. Clunk. Yeah, whatever we need to do basically to is that still in there? Thank you. To check the condition of these. So let's have a look. Is that a good place? Into the light? Maybe. Yeah, I can just about see. The white light sometimes is difficult for this part of the job. So I'm looking all the way down this. I'm looking for the scratches that I associate with the fret leveling file, and they may show up as either slightly dark patches, or you can just see that they don't fit the grain of the 240 scratches, and they just stand out a little bit. And I'm pretty sure there's one or two hints in there, so we've got a little bit more to do on the 240 grit. And you know, tempting as it is to move on, this is what will really make the difference now. Sticking with this bit and getting this right, and being kind of rigorous enough. If you don't think you've got it, don't move on. Actually, looking at this in real close up, sometimes now the light can be a little bit too bright. It's quite difficult to get the best working light on this particular part, but just looking at this from another angle, I'm actually not sure there are any of those marks left. Again, you know, twist it, tilt it in the light if you have to. You'll know when you see one. There'll just be a kind of like a little pothole of microscopic scale that will reveal itself with a little flash. And I guess if I had to say, there was potentially one, might be just there, but it's very, very tiny. I think that's got every chance of going with the next grade of paper, but if the easiest ones to spot, when the little nicks or the pock holes are big enough, you'll see the hints of the black marker pen still in there, and that, you'll know that you haven't got to them yet. But actually, that's pretty much there. Okay, I'm going to move. I'm comfortable with that. And I'm going to use 800 grit now. And I'm going to do this quite thoroughly, just to really reassure myself that everything's in good shape. And in a way, you're taking a jump from 240 to 800 here, which is quite a big jump. So you really want to make sure that this part of it picks up all of the 240 scratches and kind of wears them down into these 800 scratches. I'm going to switch to using this as well. Go right off the edge and then sure we've got all of them taken care of. Paper doesn't last too long, it's not too robust. If you start kind of speeding up, quite a light touch, about repetition in some ways now, to get this up to a really nice 800 grit scratch all the way across there. I was watching a video of me doing this stuff, I think the other day, and I was just kind of really interested in why we, human beings, some of us, stick our tongues out when we're doing things. And I know it's something kind of wired into our lizard brains and all that sort of stuff, but and there's probably a really good explanation for it. I can't remember what it is. I'm sure I've heard it somewhere along the way. There's some either early simian forebears or some sort of link in the neural pathways. But yes, for some reason, sticking your tongue out seems to improve your ability to manipulate things, or at least your brain thinks it does. It seems to think it's necessary for you to do it. You have to kind of consciously think about not doing it, which is really weird. Had a very interesting experience up in London this week. We had our works Christmas do, and we went for dinner at a restaurant that you've probably heard about it, or you might have been there, called Dans le Noir, I suppose it is. I think it's in the dark, it's called, and it's literally completely and utterly pitch black, not a single light. Actually, that's not true. There was the tiniest of glow from a fire sensor somewhere like that. Other than that, it is literally completely pitch black. You can't see anything of yourself or the table or whatever, and you're served by completely blind waiters who kind of, they're very noisy. They kind of echolocate their way around. As somebody with no vision does. So it's quite an interesting experience all round. Food was nice. Hardly any problem at all eating it. I kind of anticipated slopping it everywhere and making an absolute shocking mess, but it was much easier to eat in the dark than I could have imagined. So it was an interesting time, but the bit that I really found interesting was a couple of things. Well, one of them was in the dark, how much I felt like just disengaging. It was like, it felt like just sitting there and not talking. It was kind of like nice and quiet. And I just went, because nobody could see me, I felt really tempted to be separate and stay out of the conversation. So that was quite interesting. It seemed to give me permission to do that. After having spent a whole day with my colleagues anyway, a whole week and a whole year working together, kind of nice to be in a dark space where I could kind of become invisible. And then there's another thing where one of the guys was, I said to him, if you press your eyes in the dark, press down on the kind of corner of your eyes, kind of in the dark, you can't see anything, you press in gently on the corner of your eyes, the nerves in your eye create a sort of light show, and I'm sure some of you have done it, but my colleague Julian had never done that before, and he was absolutely amazed that his eyes produced this experience of light without any actual light source to stimulate them. So that was quite cool, watching somebody discover something that I suppose I'd been doing since I was a child. And then there was another one. I said to him, if he hadn't done that, if he'd never done that before, then maybe he'd never done this one. And I said to him, go and get a torch. You might want to try this. It's quite good fun. Things you learn here. Get a torch and stick it in your mouth. Put it on full blast, right? Stick it in your mouth And in a dark room, close your eyes and you'll see the whole of your vision in the corners go red. It's quite amazing. And also you can do it if you move the torch around your various parts of your skull here. You'll see various different points where the light gets through and triggers off kind of effects in your optic nerve or something. But there you go, amazing. You wouldn't think that your mouth connected to your eyes in that way, but it does. Anyway, strange things you learn. So yeah, interesting Christmas do, if ever I had one. Okay. I'm happy that I've got through to the right level. I've got 600 grit. And all this now is bin. So it's used up, good for nothing. Off into the bin. Okay, so now I'm ready to move on with the kind of polishing stage, really. If I'm really confident that we've got all the scratches out to the level we want. And now I get the micromesh paper. I'm going to start from the one 1500. So we're going from 800 to 1500. So I'm going to take a bit of time with this because it's quite a jump. And I'm going to just don't have to be too heavy-handed now with this. This is really polishing territory. But I'll give it some time because, as I say, it's a big jump in one go. And with all of this sort of stuff, it's tempting to rush and get this done so we can put the neck back on and then start playing with the action and new strings and all that nice stuff, setting the neck relief and getting it ready to go. But make yourself if you do this, make yourself spend a little bit of extra time on this, kind of a little bit longer than you would feel inclined to do it. Because you can't lose on this, you can only benefit. A bit more rather than less will improve, will give that extra special quality and feel of how your guitar plays in the end. Okay, so that's quite a bit of time on 15, and now we're going to 1800, so these are much quicker transitions now. Only because the grit is hardly any different, not a big jump. And 2400. Sometimes I put it on sideways to try and get a bit more life out of it. The micromesh pads last a really long time anyway, they're fantastic value. I've got 3 sets and I paid £9 each for them. I bought them at varying points in time, but they all kind of keep working as if they were bought at the same time. I don't notice any really tail off in performance. They still do what they're supposed to do, which is fantastic value. And as I've said loads of times on these videos, they're not just good for shining up metal. The micromesh pads are so good that you can put some lacquer onto a neck like this, sandpaper it down to I don't know, 800 grit sandpaper, really scuffed up and rough, and these micromesh papers will bring it back up to any amount of gloss you want, which is just fantastic. And then leaving you only a bit of scratch remover work and maybe a bit of polishing compound, but that's it. Fantastic tool. Okay, we're on to 4000. 4000 is really when you start to see it start to shine. Certainly on if you're doing lacquer, 4000 is the bit where you almost sometimes have to stop if you want a kind of silk finish. You don't really want to go beyond 4000 because it really is shiny. These are starting to feel like leather rather than abrasive pads. I mean, there's hardly any you wouldn't be able to tell this was abrasive, you just felt it in a darkened restaurant. Okay. Seems right. Okay. Right. We're on the 12,000 now. And that, my friends, is the end of our polishing regime. Just for your info, historically, in the olden days, i.e. a couple of months ago, I would have probably gone on and done a run over with a Dremel and some polishing compound, and actually discovered that I wasn't actually convinced that made any improvement, partly because I think I don't think the polishing compound was even as fine as the paper I've just used there, so there's a chance I was going backwards if anything. So I've been testing leaving it at the 12,000 grit level, and it seems to do just fine, so no point adding stages. Okay, so fun part now of patiently unpicking all of this paper, and it does take a bit of patience, and whatever you do, never use a knife at this part. Roll this stuff off if you have to, get your thumbnails under it or something, but do not use a knife because you'll just ruin your finish on your neck. When we get this off, your neck's probably going to have picked up some grime from the process because it's dusty, and you can see the colour it's made the masking tape go. So you might at this stage want to also give it a go over with naphtha or lighter fluids, or the cleaning stuff we use for cleaning. Just freshen it up a bit. I think I've got a visitor. Hello. Mister, come in, Mister. Hello, Mr. M. Here, I'll put the heater on for you, Mr. M. Mr. Maurice. Yes, so once we've just given this a quick wipe down, after we've got all the masking tape off, then we're pretty much ready to start reassembling. This guitar is in nice condition. I don't think it doesn't need any components cleaning. I'm going to have a look, see whether we should take the tremolo bridge or the bridge section apart and clean out the little saddles, because that's quite a nice way of refreshing a guitar, making it look a bit nicer. Here comes Morris. He likes to be in on the action. Hello. Some of you will have seen him before. He's always around, aren't you, Mr. Morris? You wait all week for me to come home to do this. And with this neck, it's a little dry looking now after we've cleaned all its residual gunk out. So what I will do in a second is I'll give it a... What are you looking for? I'll give it a bit of lemon oil. But I'm kind of... I don't really know where I stand on that. A lot of people love oil on their rosewood fretboards, and then you get people like, what's his name, Scott Grove, who I got a lot of respect for his position on all these things, and he thinks basically his view is that oil and wood aren't very good bedfellows. Oil and water, are natural bedfellows, but the truth is, old wood and fingerboards that we play with always pick up grease from our fingers anyway. So at the moment that looks a little bit dry, so I'll just pretend somebody's been playing it for years by just putting a bit of lemon oil back into it. But it's not. Oh, a bit. I'll squirt it everywhere. Sorry, Morris. You know, for me, it's kind of aesthetic more than anything. It's just making it look a little bit darker and a little bit more vibrant before we put the guitar back together again. You can rub it in a little bit if it makes you feel better. Would you like the smell of that? Were you trying to eat it? Yes, I wouldn't bother if I were you. I don't think cats like citrus stuff. Don't they put the stuff on the flower beds to stop you peeing on it? Mr. Morris. Oh, it's a great workshop companion. It's great to have around when he's not knocking over the Dremel box and things like that. I think eventually he'll just settle down next to the radiator I've got in here. Okay, that's alright, I'm not pushing you off your perch. So some goo that came off with that process. It's not perfect, you can still see some kind of shapes of the original thing, but it's cleaner than it was and it's sort of ready to go. But in the heart of all of that, of course, is a beautifully shiny and levelled set of frets that are now ready to play and play well. So I'm going to take off the special reading grandpapa glasses, and this bit is where it may be that Morris is in the way, but heck, I don't want to have to move you if I don't need to. Okay, alright. So, our what do you even call it? Encore Blaster body. Got so many rags in this workshop for cleaning things. It's silly at times. Okay, so this will have picked up some dust. It's always the way if you put a guitar to rest somewhere while you're doing something, let's say with the frets, that what will happen is you'll get this guitar will pick up, the body sitting there will pick up some of that dust. It's inevitable. So, you know, I'm always giving it a kind of catch-up clean. But basically speaking, this is in pretty nice condition. It'd be nice to take off the thingy here. I will do it. It's one of the things for me that brings the guitar a kind of new, freshened up feel, and it's only a few minutes work. So I'll just take out the I'll try and take out the springs if they'll comply. A bit tight. Once I've got them out, then we can just unscrew the screws on the other side, and we can let the bridge come out. Actually, we don't even need to take that off. It's just probably easier. Let's get this screwdriver. I can just take out these things here. I'll just whiz them out quickly, and then I'm going to clean each one individually. Now, just before I do it, are there any differences? No, they're all the same length. So it doesn't matter what order they go back in, because we're going to set the intonation afresh anyway, which is always what you want to do when you change anything around or do a restring, or particularly in this case a refret. Sorry, not refret, fret dressing or fret leveling. So yeah, this is a bit cosmetic, but it's a nice cosmetic bit. You've got a nice bright chrome tremolo block, which you might as well give it a little bit of TLC. And while we're at it, then we'll clean these individual saddles up so that they also look a bit fresher and newer. Okay, so what I will do, since we're not going to take that out altogether, I'll put those springs back in. There's no reason to keep them off. And I'm just going to give them the maximum grip, I'm going to push them to the maximum extent, so that's from the close to the middle as possible to as close to the outside as is feasible, and at the same time doing it in an even spread across the tremolo block. But you can see it sort of fans out basically. There you can be a little bit difficult to reach when you've got the body in the way. Now these, interestingly, these tremolo blocks can be really the way they're made of some alloy which can be quite easy to break, surprisingly easy to break. So be careful when you're putting springs back in that you don't. And I think they tend to break if you hook the little piece of metal on the spring. If you hook it in too close to the edge, you're putting it on a weak spot, and sometimes that can break off a chunk of the block alloy, because it's quite soft, crumbly metal, believe it or not. On these guitars, and many Squiers as well, by the way. Some of the guitars that people sometimes don't pay as much attention to as I think they should, the vintage series, so the older or upmarket brother and sister of these guitars here, they have stainless steel or solid steel, sorry, not stainless, solid steel blocks, which have much greater weight and also much greater sustain characteristics as well. And I've taken apart several of those vintage guitars, and actually when you do, you can hold the components up side by side with an equivalent Fender thing, and just the quality difference is immediately notable. Morris, why don't you go on here? Morris, go on here. It's nice and warm. Go on. There you go. You know you like it next to the radiator, look. Yeah, you'll be fine there. Yeah, so it's a tangible difference in quality, and you'll open up many a Fender style guitar of that kind of price range, or Squier, sorry, many a Squier guitar. You'll open up and you'll find immediately that there's chunks, bites taken out of the tremolo block, where it's given way under the sort of tension of somebody trying to pull the spring, hook the spring back into place. And of course with the steel one, not only is it better quality as a single unit, but it also won't break that way because it's solid steel. And you know, I've said it on a few videos before that the component for component, the quality of the vintage guitars is way and ahead of the Squiers, and yet they're under-respected, I suppose you could say, by guitarists. They don't know the brand, so people still keep buying Squiers when a comparable guitar, even cheaper guitar with far greater quality, is available in the vintage range. You know, it's their old name familiarity of the brand name. And it's a shame, really, because the quality is just so much different. And so one of my favourite guitars, in fact probably at the moment my all-time favourite, is one of the earliest ones I bought and kept, and that's a vintage AV6 Stratocaster, and it's got 3 P90 style pickups, and you can roll the tone, the second tone button rolls rolls the humbucker P90s into sort of single coil mode, and it's just a great guitar in my book, and it weighs an absolute ton, and it's nice, you know, great quality, not just weight. It's not just pound for pound, it's good. And they're incredibly rare as well. You won't see many of them around, but when I do, I sort of pounce on them if I can. Okay, so having cleaned that up, I'm going to put these bits back in for the time being, and they won't be in the right position that I need them to be in, but we'll do that more precisely when we come to the intonation part. So to begin with, I just need to get them to bite and take hold. And I'm doing this by hand because that first bite can be quite tricky, and we don't want it cross-threading or threading on in a wonky fashion, because it will just spoil the thing. So that first initial bite by hand is probably good, and if you want to get a power driver on once it's kind of caught, then by all means do. As long as you're one of those people who's gentle with the power screwdriver, because you need to have a very subtle hand to use one on guitars. If you haven't got any, if your power driver hasn't got any sort of I don't know what the word is, a gradual power setting, so that this one, you know, is touch sensitive. You can get more or less torque out of it by squeezing it more or less gently. So you need that for working on this kind of thing. If you don't have it, then my recommendation would be avoid power tools at all costs, because they'll just end up forcing things into holes. And of course, you know, things like the pick guard is just a piece of plastic that needs holding on. It doesn't need any force whatsoever applied to the screws, and one of the first things that will happen in any of these plastics is if you put undue force on it with a power driver of any kind, or even by hand, is you'll split the plastic, which spoils the look of the things. Okay, so I've just taken a bit of time there to clean up this the bridge saddles and the tremolo block. It's not perfect. I could have, if you wanted to really do it perfectly, you could take it out and bathe it in, I don't know, rubbing alcohol and get the toothbrush on it, or soapy water, and then dry it thoroughly. But you know, I can just give it a quick whiz over like that, and then I've got myself something that kind of feels a bit fresher than it was when I got it. And all of it goes towards helping you if you're looking to sell your guitar. Then this is going to be visually much more appealing than one that has, you know, you present in the photograph with all its 30 years of teenager's bedroom grime built into it. Okay, so I'm just swizzling around for a second. I'm trying to put the wires out of the way a minute. So what we have here is body played. I played it this afternoon, so I don't need to look at the electrics. Guitar plays well. Everything's intact. No loose wires or anything. So I'm now in a position to reassemble. I'm just going to quickly whiz over that again and take off any excess oil. Now I'm going to start by pushing the body and neck together on this side, so I can observe where everything is going in. This is beautifully snug, so I know that if I just turn this over now, I'm going to be in the right position. And actually I can turn it over and just gently rest it flat. Get myself out the 4 neck bolts. Now remember, I made a note earlier on, and that note said that this guitar came off, or the bolts came out with only 3 torque setting of 3 or force of 3. So I can put it back in lightly with 3 and do it up with 4, or if I'm feeling really adventurous, at most 5. But we don't need any more than that to get it back to where it was. And if we do that, we're pretty confident then we won't be running the risk of cracking anything. So first of all, kind of let each screw locate. You can do opposite corners if you want. It doesn't really matter because it's such a snug fit. You're just letting them locate into their holes and start the pickup. Start taking out the slide. Okay, now we've still got a plate that's free and rattling about, and I'm going to make the first one go in tight, and that will locate the corner of the plate. And again, I haven't done it up massively tight. And then I'll go for the other corner, let that find its plate, put the plate in position. And then I've done the same for all 4. And then I'm going to just go onto each one of them and fire it up until the torque kicks or clicks, whichever you want to say. And again, it's not super scientific, but it is good enough, and the neck is well enough attached on this guitar not to risk any more pressure or undue tension that might damage the neck heel or the neck itself. So there we go, we have a freshly levelled set of frets, oiled neck, nicely lightly tapped but securely enough back into place. If you're somebody who feels even slightly nervous about it and you want to go one step further, then I recommend you just give it a little quarter turn with your hand, and you'll feel the kind of tension. That's actually it's about an eighth more turn I'm doing, and that's absolutely spot on for me. So it's done up a little tighter than it came to us, but that's not a problem. It's really nice and secure now. Okay, so from this point we're ready to put some strings onto it. I am actually short of strings. I've got one set for this, and I've got one set of 10s for the Sinister Gates heavy rock guitar thing from hell. Well, that's what I call just enough. Not too little, just enough. Unless the next ones I ordered arrive tomorrow. Righty-ho, so here's an interesting one. We've got some strings to put on, and there is, let's get a bit of second-hand old strings to do a test on. I always keep a set of old strings. They come in really handy for testing things out. So, for example, if I find my way to untangling this E string here, I learned in the week a technique for putting strings on, which a New Zealander who's a guitar tech for many big bands and is constantly restringing guitars out on the road in a hurry, and he needs to get them restrung and kind of playing operationally very, very quickly. So here's a technique for this that he shared with this Facebook page that we are on. And so in order to test this out, I'm going to use a spare string and try and talk you through what I'm doing. Now, my camera that I'm using here is not really ideal for showing this, so it's going to be more talking through it than seeing it in detail. He did it with I think an iPad camera, which kind of got a little bit closer than I can get. So I'm just going to cut the already crimped end off the string to make sure I can get it through. And so his piece of advice was to come through. Always make sure that the string is seated correctly, right up into the steel block or the alloy block. If it drops back in, you'll get a sort of strange, I don't know what the word is. You could get it could snap or pop its way through. So let's see if you can get a good look. So, courtesy of Gavin, he says you come through, and he says through the thing, and then he says you pull back. I haven't really got enough because this is a second-hand string now, but he'd say you pull back 2 inches, right? And he'd do it like this. That's how he'd test it. So he'd pull it up under tension, and let's call it exactly there. So then he'd say you turn it round. And he needs a bit. We need to have a little bit of lead sticking through because we've got to go. He'd say turn it around and do one above. So tighten up one above the leftover bit. There it is. There's one above. Okay. We're coming around. It's completing the first one above, and then he'd say go 2 below the line. So you kind of push further down there into there, and I can see it seems to make sense to me now. And we're going to get a sort of loop of 2 underneath there. And no more really, it's just over 2. That's not too bad actually. And what that does is it traps the, I don't think you can really see too clearly, but it traps the excess bit of string, the sticky out bit of string between 2 layers, or between layers of the loop or the coil, and actually if it tightens up it puts pressure on that to stop it moving anywhere. And then he described a technique for taking the slack out of the string, which was to go along with your fingers and thumb and bend the string sideways, not up and down. He was saying take the stretch out of it by kind of going all the way up and down the length of it, doing this, and then taking it up to pitch. Now I typically would do it by stretching it this way as well. I've never had it break, so it's not really a problem for me. So there you go, that's me testing out the method on an old string, which I can now undo and chuck away, because we're now going to go for some nice new ones. come. I've had a thing recently for these cream coloured straps. I really like them, as you can probably tell by the fact that there's been a few come through the Reloved workshop. Oh sorry, it's all a bit clumsy, I'm making a mess. Oh, everything's breaking. Sorry. Right, we can still see. Okay, I'm going to put that one back up there again anyway for possible reuse for another such exercise. But now we're on to the real thing, a bit more slack to play with as well. But we'll do the same thing in principle. And Morris will try from underneath where he's sitting on a chair, he's going to try and grab the ends. So we're up through the block as far away as we can get. Let's put this back where I need it. Right, through the peg, through till it's taut, and then I'll pull it back a couple of inches. Is that a couple of inches? Let's see, I'll do it like that. He said 2 frets worth. Let's take him at his word. And then we go round, and the first one's going to go over the top of the spare loop. So I guess we're just holding it and watching it go round as the slack or the spare excess goes underneath. We complete our first one and then we press it right down so it now goes below the spare string. And that's going to get a bit caught up, but we can keep hoiking it out so it's out of the way. Aesthetically for me that might be a tiny bit too much slack going through, so we're now ending up with about 3 coils underneath, which is a tiny bit more than I'd want. Probably more chance of getting a bit slack there, but it's fine, it's okay for this one. And I'm going to cut it reasonably short for now. I always leave a little bit on in case we need to remove and start again for any strange reason. Now this time I'm going to go back only 1 inch and a bit, because I've always worked to 1 inch personally, and I think that 2 inches is probably too much. Certainly on the thicker strings they fill up on the pegs quite quickly. Okay, so again we go through, pull it reasonably taut, and then this time I'm going to come back about 1.5 inches this time, and I'm going to start there. And so I'm going to just start winding and hold the string at a level that will let the spare go underneath. Right, go round once with the spare underneath, and then we duck back under the excess. I can pull it up if I want it out of the way. Right, this guy's got to go back under. Now it's under. That kind of locks it in place, and then we just now keep going until it tightens up nicely. So that's quite a good little technique. Extra bit of holding power, I suppose, and it will give you that tiny bit more stable tuning, which is great. And some people will pay more to have tuners that give them that facility. I often will add the Wilkinson Easy Lock tuners to guitar that I'm setting up to sell, because it does that same thing very easily, but even a bit more stably than this method. It introduces a sort of 90-degree kink into the string path. Okay, so again I'm going to tighten up, come back 1.5 inches and stop there. Start winding. Let the first one go over the top. I encourage the first one to go over the top. That's good. Pull the slack bit up now, and then start to press the string down to the bottom of the headstock, and it will go. Now should pull underneath the slack string, and it will then carry on winding around below it. Nice. Okay, so what you're hearing at the moment there is I've moved all the saddles around, so the action set all wrong at the moment, which means you're going to get the strings grounding out, but don't worry. Here goes the plain G string that you get with the 9 set, with the super slinky 9s, and again, same process all the way through, pull it back just over an inch. I'm going to kind of curtail the extra here. Look at this. You know, if you do this, you'll practice it a few times, and you'll, like me, you'll end up at the amount of slack that does the job just the way you think it should go. It's around about 1 fret's worth or 1 1/4 fret's worth, something like that. Maybe 2 if you want. Okay, so the first one around the top, comes round to the top, meets it at the top. Let's get that going underneath, which means we'll pull the string right up and slide that underneath, and then all the rest, however much it is, piles up underneath. And cut a bit of the excess off. I also find leaving these a little bit longer for the time being tends to avoid the inevitability of me getting spiked. Okay, Morris, you can't have it, Morris. Let it go. Morris, I don't want your drool on it, my friend. Morris, there you go. Okay. Nearly there. Now these last 2 will go under the string tree. Again, I always recommend, and I never have any, and I keep forgetting to get some, but it would be great to have a supply of string trees, whatever you'd call them, because the basic design are a bit flawed, in my opinion. I think most people think so. Just because they're not inherently very slippy, and they're not like, they create friction against the string basically. Not too much, but it can get a bit sticky, particularly if they're slightly on an angle, and if they've got any corrosion underneath them, they can really start getting obstructive. And a roller version would avoid that altogether. Right, I'm just going to thread the last one now, and then the job will be to just go straight to getting the strings up to approximate tension. Now again, this isn't, I'll take this in stages. This isn't getting the guitar ready to play instantly. This is about bringing the guitar strings up to tension to get the neck under load, and then to start looking at what we want to do and what we can do with the action as a result of having done the fret leveling work. Right, so don't be rushing is the advice. Go around the top, we want the first one to go over, please. First one to go over, and then we're going to drop it down so the next one goes under, and help it on its way by bending the string up, and then go under the string tree, and then bring it up to tightness. And as we're doing this, before we put it under too much tension, I'd recommend at this stage, this would be a good place to adjust the string tree position so that it is as straight as it can be in the string's path, because now it will move easily. Later on, when you're under tension, it will get harder. Okay, well, I'm going to do, what am I going to do? I've got a guitar in here to get the pitch from, or have I? And I have this Sinister Gates. Let's borrow Sinister Gates. Okay, the other one bending as the neck now starts to starts to bend under pressure. These aren't playing very well because, of course, the bridge saddles are wrong. Well, the way things are currently set here, I'm not going to get anything to play at all, even to get it up to tension. So I'm just going to cheat for a second and whiz a step forward and just crank up these saddles, which I've rearranged badly, but they've ended up being... Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Hear that little clinky noise? I'll chuck away my finest, smallest Allen key. Luckily, I've been able to find it. Not that Morris helped or anything, but yes. So I can't set even the relative tension on the neck, because at the moment the strings are all buzzing on the frets because the bridge saddles are all in the wrong place. So I'm just going to whack those up enough to give a playing note to allow me to tune the guitar, and then we'll do some stretching of the strings, and then everything will play for a minute. That'll do. Right, give me an E. Okay, now we know that's going to go out of tune, so that's fine. Let's just do the bending thing that our mate Gavin showed us. So it's like just taking the natural bend sideways out of all these strings, and I hope it's not going to end in any catastrophes of snappings, because that's never happened to me before, taking the bend out string. So it would be a shame to waste a set of strings just by trying out a new technique. I'd be mightily disheartened. But anyway, you know, Gavin's got loads of experience, so if this guy gets guitars ready for bands at a regular basis, then he's going to know how to do it as much as anybody else, if not more. Okay, well, I'm going to leave that pretty much there. One more pull, one more tune up, and then what I'll do is we'll start concentrating on the things we need to take care of for the action. So the first one will be neck relief. For that, of course, we need this under tension. Okay, under tension. Just do up our friend the sinister gates for a minute. Get him out of the way safely. Okay, So we're under tension, and the first thing I'm going to do is have a look down the neck, and I can see that this has pulled quite a lot of relief into the neck, and more than I would like. So I'm going to dial out, to begin with, dial out some of this relief, and I'm absolutely confident and convinced now that taking out the relief is going to be a clockwise turn on this thing. Okay, I know this to be true, honestly. So I'm going to make sure I get the thing in there gripping nicely, and I'm going to put some pressure on it. And it's going to be under pressure because it's working against the pressure of the strings, or the tension of the strings. Now at this point in time, I'm not interested in how high the strings are or what they look like or anything. I'm just interested in making the neck not straight. I want the neck to be reasonably straight, but with a degree of bend in it. And I'm going to stop there for now. That's probably got enough. But I'm cautious, or I'm conscious that I may want to do some more as we get into sort of finer fettling. So let me just throw away these wrappers and string offcuts. Right, so onwards into the next stage. So we have a guitar that's strung. We have all the bridge saddles here. Interesting the way they line up. They're as if they're slightly too big. They kind of tilt the thing. They're perfectly fine, they'll work. It just looks like they're a mouthful of teeth, with too many teeth down at this end, just slightly. They're kind of splaying out a little bit. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to come back to the bridge end, assuming now that I've got about the right sort of bend in the neck. And the reason you need bend in the neck, by the way, is if you didn't know, it's to allow your strings to kind of rotate like imagine a skipping rope when you were a kid. When you swing that skipping rope round, it doesn't go side to side in a flat plane, it goes round in a circle that's wider in the middle and tighter circle at the ends, and that's the same here. In the midpoint of your strings, somewhere around the 12th fret, you need quite some room for the string to spin round and describe its circle as it vibrates in all loads of different kind of, I suppose you could say, diameters. Anyway, so a completely flat fingerboard won't work, but one with some curve in it to allow that string to rotate will. And it's you could go and find the manufacturer's specifications, or like me, you could do it by eye and by feel. And if we've got too little in there, I'll find out shortly and then put it right. So for now, I'm going to, oh sorry Morris, I'm going to just bend on my croaky knees, and I'm going to use my gauge, and I'm going to set on the 22nd fret, because I like to work on the 22nd fret. I'm going to wind down my bass E action, okay, and I'm going to take it down. I'm going to take it down. First of all, I'm going to take it down till both feet touch the ground. That's probably a start. Currently now it's on 1.4 millimeters at the 22nd fret, really. 1.5 actually as it stands, and I can take it down. 1.5 is pretty good action. Now I'm on 1.25. If I stop there, what I can feel straight away is I can give myself a test and say, okay, the note's gone, but okay, so we know that it plays all the notes. What I can also tell you is that the relief is still too great. Another way of telling it, I don't know if you can see now, another way of gauging it, and again it's purely visual, is to hold the last fret and the first fret and just look for the gap halfway between, and you can press the string up and down, see what that gap is, and it's a little bit too great, a bit too great, not too much too great, but just a little bit. So that's a way of telling, as well as seeing it as a curve. But at 1.25 millimeters at the moment, it's playing quite nicely, but that too great a curve may be affecting that little bit of buzz. And if we were to take that tiny bit out, this is where we see the subtlety of it. If we let's get all the strings set in relation to that one. And then what we'll hear is, if we've still got a slightly bit of buzz here, what I'll do is I'll take a tiny widget out of the relief, and let's see if that tiny move makes any difference to that. Okay, so again, back to the action. I'm going to do this just purely by eye, and while I'm at it, I'm going to try and, if I need to readjust these bridge saddles into the right position, because sometimes they kind of move across, I'm just going to be a bit physical with them and just lever them into place, because they won't go into the exact position they're supposed to go into unless you tell them, because they'll sit wherever they're under pressure. It's a funny thing, and they'll also sit in grooves that have been made, so don't be afraid to push them around into place when you need to. Okay, so I'm going to go and set the action on all the other strings, bearing in mind that to follow the curve of the fingerboard, they will need to rise a bit away from the string towards the middle, so they won't all be at the same height. You need to rise up in relation. And again, this is a visual thing for me, and I'm going to look at it from a couple of angles, you'll see in a minute, so that I'm confident that when I've got the radius pretty much the way I like it, in relation, so that I think the strings are broadly following the shape of the guitar neck, because we can look down it in lots of different ways. And when we're happy with that, then we can move down to the other end and start adjusting down at that end. And when we say that, I mean the nut, and that's a really, really important part of this. Often, mostly overlooked in my experience certainly on guitars coming out of the factory. Okay, so what I've done now is I've given myself a sort of broad, and there's another way of looking at it is to look at it down like this, and I can see a kind of radius shape. It gives me a very low action here, slightly higher action on bass possibly, but all told, I can see from looking at shadows and everything that there's pretty much, this is following a nice contour all the way across. So I'm going to need to get a tuning out of it, and for this I'll try and use my tuner this time. So you can see how long this is taking. It's not a quick process. Come on, tuner. Let's use iStrobo Soft. I've lost my faith in this a little bit recently, but let's see if it can earn it back. Okay. So already it's playing. These strings suffering from a little bit of that buzz at that height. All playing, which is quite good. As I say, just a tiny bit of buzz. Now I'm looking at this relief in the neck, looking at how it. I can't see from these glasses. It's not a good way. Bearing in mind, every time I move anything, there is gravity involved, and gravity. Morris, seeing Morris's backside again. Gravity will affect it, but even looking down here with gravity as much cancelled out in terms of the neck bend as possible. It is a little bit too much. So if I take a tiny bit more of this relief out of the neck, including moving Morris, and that is a clockwise movement against the kind of weight of the strings, if you like, or the pressure of the strings. If I take a bit more of this out, Morris, let me get this done, right, then I'm going to get a slightly different feel, and it's incredibly, what's the word, it's an incredibly small amount, but you can just do it. Sometimes you'll get rid of that tiny little slapping buzz is almost gone. What you can get back, however, sometimes then is a choke on the on certain notes which you don't want. So it's a kind of, that's okay, that's okay. That may be just the action issue. So again, I'm just going to be prepared if Morris would move a tiny bit, and be prepared just to adjust the action. Another way I found, by the way, of knowing where the action's right and wrong in terms of following the curve of the guitar or the radius, is you can see how the strings relate to each other in terms of spacings. So I can see straight away that in fact the B string here is actually set too low, which is why it's choking a little bit, whereas the others aren't. So I'm just going to bring that one up a little bit into line, and so that the distance of the gap looks just about right between all the strings. And I can just borrow my plectrum. Right, all playing, beautiful. So don't worry about the tuning, it's still bedding in the new strings. So what we've got now is an action at the 21st fret or the 12th fret, or wherever you want to call it, that's pretty good. Okay, strings still bedding in, action down here is nice, intonation isn't done, radius, shape of the strings going over the neck is good. Now we've got some work we can do to reduce the height of the strings over the first fret, which is the kind of final part of the action setting, and it's the bit that sometimes makes the most profound difference of all. So let's get this tune back up for a second, if I may, Morris. So this is infinitely better than it was before, all right? And we're not even there yet, which is great. We've got a bit more adjustment to do. I'm going to stop for a minute, need a break, but yeah, starting to go really well. So you've seen a bit about how I go about it, which is take it step by step. It's always in the same sequence for me. It's get the neck done, frets done, neck back on, strings, loading it under tension, get the neck relief just about right, mixture of eyeballing it and feeling it, then set a single string kind of decent 1.25 millimeter playing action at the 22nd fret, not at the 12th. I always work off the end, but you know, whatever it is doesn't matter as long as you stick to the same sort of judgment each time. Get that level right, and then I kind of make all the rest right in relation to it, visually following the radius of the guitar. And then once I've done that, there might be a slight tweak to the neck relief to iron out any chokes or buzzes, or having again eyeballed the strings and the way they relate in terms of the spacing, I might see an obvious string that has been left a bit low and therefore it's got a buzzing problem. We'll raise that, get those back to where they should be, or completely level with each other in relation to each other. And by the time we've done that, we've now got a guitar that's settling in. It's got all of this end pretty well done, and now we've got the luxury of doing two more things. One is getting the heights of the strings over the first fret absolutely perfect to make it play as easily and as well intoned as possible. And once we've done that, the string by string intonation, and then the job's done and it's ready to play. And I think the first thing I'm going to do with this guitar is probably play the hell out of it tonight on my new Zoom X3 3X pedal, or whatever it's called, G3X pedal, which I got today. So yeah, really good. This is coming along nicely indeed. I've just got a hair stuck under there. Okay, so I will stop for now and I will talk to you a bit later on. Stick with it. Okay, welcome to the last stage of this setup of this Encore Blaster Strat. Very nice John Hornby Skews type guitar. A couple of cats fighting around it. Right, okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to just check and cut the correct nut slot depths to make sure the strings go at the optimum height over the first fret, to make sure the intonation's right there and it's easy to play. And this makes all the difference as part of the setup. It's one of the most overlooked things, as I think I've already mentioned, but it really does make all the difference. So you can see, I'm going to be a bit closer. So what you can see is currently this gap on here isn't too massive, but it's bigger than the 0.3 of a millimetre that I aim for, and you can tell that by putting the 0.3 under there, and it plays the note and there's a gap. So we're going to aim for 0.3, and I'm going to take the first string off and just going to kick off and do this as quick as we can do it, because I've been doing this a long time now. I've got a couple of different tools to use here, and one of them is a set of files that I've bought especially for this job, and used quite a few times already now. And I've also got some cheaper versions that I used previous to having those correct tools. So this, I'm going to use a combination of both to get this right. So basically what I'm going to do is to take the file to this nut, which is a very brittle material for a change. Usually it's a kind of plasticky waxy stuff, making it very hard to cut. But in this case it's pretty good stuff, so we shouldn't have any problems. I'm going to use a combination of this file and that welding nozzle cleaner that I've got here, which can double as obviously as a fret file, no, nut file. So many stupid little words to keep using. So I go back up to pitch each time, not because it has to be in tune particularly, but it's good to have it under the correct tension, because that way you make sure that the string is sitting in its correct place. Sometimes if it can, I mean, it shouldn't by rights do it, but occasionally you might find it sticking somewhere. If you don't put any tension on it, it might stick halfway down the slot. So for me, just putting it under tension makes sure that it sits where it should do in the slot before I make my measurement. I still see that gap. So I just keep on going with the file tilted slightly backwards. I want the string to come upwards and then launch off the front face of the nut. And so a slope is good for that. Now we're almost on the mark there. You can hear it starting to choke off on the 0.3. Now I know, having done this quite a lot of times before, I know I can actually get away with 0.25 as a nice playing action. But I'm going to go for 0.3 because it's conservative. Still got a bit of room. Yeah, 0.3 is conservative, and sometimes 0.25 can feel almost a little bit too extreme. So 0.3 is a nice working, still a bit of room, nice working norm for me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for that 0.3 all the way across, and just by doing it string by string I'll preserve the radius, because I'll just make sure it's 0.3 above whatever the radius is. Okay, I'm going to think, yeah, it's good enough for me. I'm touching there. Okay, so I'm going to take that one off, drop it off to the side, and I'm going to just do a check on the next one. We're not far off on this, a little bit, so I've got to be very cautious that I don't overcut this one, because there isn't that much we need to take out. Now, if we do get it wrong with this kind of nut, we have a kind of get out of jail free card. And that is either we use a replacement nut, which I have a couple of somewhere, or we use a technique which involves using a bit of super glue and a little bit of baking powder, and that is a sort of temporary cement fix, but it's pretty good and it works very, very well. You just fill the slot that you've cut too far. Fill it with just a little pile of baking powder, and then on top of that blob a small blob of very viscous, preferably most viscous, runny super glue you can get, and within seconds that will dry, forming a kind of concrete cement or whatever they call it, you know, like a resin. That's good for me. Yep, it'll form a very solid resin which you can then cut away again with your you can then cut away again with the files. We're almost there on this one. I hardly think we need to touch those at all. In fact, I'm going to stop right there, because there's no point overdoing this just for the sake of it. Now, as I'm here and I've got these strings backed off, I'm going to just put a tiny bit of what's that stuff? So no, not silicone, graphite into each of these slots. Put those back in and tighten them up. Blow away the excess. Get them in tune roughly. Here comes Morris. So there's the bottom three tuned, and I'm just going to slack off the top three so I can put some graphite underneath there as well. And once we've done that, we're all done at this end of the action. And then we've got one step left to go really, and that's the intonation, which it should be fairly straightforward. And that involves adjusting the bridge saddles. The neighbour's yelling. Yeah, adjusting the bridge saddles position to ensure that the string, each string, is exactly the length it needs to be to complement this neck. So it's not an aesthetic thing; it's a musical thing. It's a scientific thing. In other words, each string has to be a particular length. Yeah, each string has to be a particular length to suit the neck. Okay, so without any much hard work there at all on this guitar, we've got the nut slots set correctly. I can get rid of my files for the time being, put them out of the way. I can close this door so we don't lose all the heat from the shed. No point. Now, Morris, you want to come down here. Come on, fella. You want to come down here onto the stool by the radiator. Look, it's lovely and warm. There we are, look nice, lovely, there. You just stay there. Right, let's get into final furlong, hurdle, final stage, leg, arm. Right, okay, so let's just zoom out for a second. Okay, going well on this guitar, I'm very pleased with progress. Let's get the graphite out of the way. Let's get a plectrum out ready for intonation. Now for intonation, we're going to need a view. Get a view. We don't want lights, too much bright lights in the way. We're going to need an amplifier, which I have my battery powered Roland Cube, which is dead handy at any time of day or night. Battery powered Roland Cube with the worst positioned on and off button I've ever come across. I never ever know if it's on or off, or where the button is actually. Right, it's on. We're going to go for clean sound, no effects, plug in our guitar. And for the purpose of making this work, we need the tuner, which I'm going to use. I'm going to try and make it work with iStrobo Soft, which I loved for about a year. UK train times, isn't it? I loved this app for a year or so until it suddenly went, I don't know, they did an upgrade, and to my liking, I can't get it to be as sensitive or as intuitive or reliable as it was before. Anyway, okay, so here we are in the land of trying to make a noise. We got one. Okay, so I'm just going to do a bit of string pulling, just get the last bit of stretch out of these strings and get ready to do the intonation. Right, okay, so look. Right, so the principle here is that each of these strings, the strings for this guitar have to be exactly the correct length for this neck, and by this neck I mean for the rate at which these frets come closer together. Now that is a scientific setting. It's been worked out mathematically for a particular scale length. So the rate at which these frets get closer together is worked out and set in advance for an intended scale length, which is a guitar with an intended length of free playing string. Now that's all very well, so there are some conventions. Some guitars, Gibsons and Fenders, Strats and those kinds of things, tend to have the same or all built to their own scale length, which stays constant, so that you could interchange necks with certain guitars, for example, and it should work. But you could technically you could make a neck pretty much any length you like, but you would have to then place a bridge somewhere else than it's placed here to make the whole thing work and to make each interval be musically correct and accurate. If you didn't, if we moved this bridge back here, each of these notes would be wouldn't be a semitone. There would be a slight fraction more or less of a semitone, and you'd never be able to stay in tune. So even if you managed to tune it down here, by the time you got up here, you would not be true in tune with any other instrument which had accurate intervals. So the purpose of this is you have a neck that is built to a standard for a certain kind of guitar, and that requires that you place the bridge in a certain position. That isn't the end of it. Each string, because of its characteristics of different thickness, has to have a slightly different length, and that different length is set by the position of these bridge saddles. So if you bring them towards the nut, you shorten the string. If you take them towards the back of the guitar, you lengthen the string fractionally. And the way we find out if the string is currently the correct length and how we adjust it is by pinging a harmonic on the 12th fret and tuning the guitar to that. So we're going to get a clear note. So we tune that to as true as we can get, Watch the bars on the chromatic tuner. You want it to stop and be as stable as possible. Of course, talking interferes with it. Now, if this string is currently exactly the right length for this neck and this formula at which these frets get closer together, then we will find that this note here will be exactly the same as the fretted note on the 12th fret. So here's the pinged harmonic, here's the fretted 12th. And you can see straight away that it's telling us that note is slightly sharp. Okay, and that means the string length is the string's too short. Okay, so we're going to need to adjust the bridge, saddle, and take this saddle backwards towards the rear of the guitar. Now it's quite difficult to do it because it's under tension, and it's quite easy if you're not careful to start stripping off the screw heads at the back, so do really careful. Now, having done that, I've lengthened the string, but it will now have made the note lower because the string's longer. Sorry. Actually, no, it's not. It's higher. Let's put it under tension. Sorry. So we need to retune. Okay. Still sharp. Again, so we carry on turning this, and we got to do it. It's actually needing to turn it. We're doing it clockwise to pull the saddle back. Kind of hard to do this because you have to have a soft screwdriver so you don't scratch the back of the guitar. So you retune back. Get some treble into that. Still sharp, so we're going to pull back even further. The challenge of this is, if you have to go too far with this first one, all the others are going to be ridiculously far back in comparison, because they all step backwards in a kind of line when it's correctly intonated. So at this point I start to get nervous because it's making me think I'm not going to get to intonate this properly. Right, so it's still telling me it's sharp, which is, as I say, concerning, because I'm now in danger of running out of intonation space. I'm going to also switch to a different screwdriver to get this job done, because at the moment that little screwdriver is in danger of damaging the threads. Okay. That click is hitting the pickups, which are too high. Again, having lowered the action, I now need to change these and get them out of the way of the pickups a bit, just so they're a bit more balanced. Otherwise we're going to have the bridge pickups going to be unduly loud. Get those out of the way a bit, and likewise we'll take down the centre pickup as well, so it's a bit more balanced. That's an interesting situation now, because we are going to run out of intonation room. Try a little bit more and see what happens. So technically, although it's not looking good for all the other strings, which have to be even further back, I'm going to go as far as I can to set this right. That's close. So the proof is it can be done, but it's a way further back than it was originally set. I can see how the scratches on the original scratch marks on the chrome have never been intonated properly. So let's see what happens with the B. Way sharp. So we'd expect that. So that means I'm going to have to screw this all the way in, and if there's any relation to its position in relation to the E string, which it should be, then we'll have to go a long way back to intonate this. Close. As I say, it's not looking good because not only does the B string have to come back a bit further, but all the bottom three strings also have to go further back than all of these. So whether we're going to get that at all out of this, I don't know. It's close. I'll go back a little bit further. As I say, there's practically no more adjustment room left on this B, and that means there's nothing left for any of the other strings, which is horrendous. So what we've got here is a guitar that, in my view, has had the bridge placed slightly out of kilter, and about the only thing I can think that's possible for me to do with this may be to cut down the strings . Just about right. If I have to cut down these strings, that's a real pain. The springs, it's a real pain in the arse because I have got no way of doing it without taking the strings off. Or the only other alternative, which I didn't really have to bargain for this, is I'd have to do it by cutting them and pulling them out from here, which is another possibility. But judging by the intonation that's required here, I'm going to have to do it, which is really bizarre. So this guitar has never been intonated properly before. Okay, I am going to go to the extreme now and cut with my pliers and my spectacles of doom. I'm going to cut these springs and I'm going to pull them out by their teeth with the pliers, and that is going to cut it halfway. There we go. Come on, halfway, come on, cut it. That's not really what we want to hear. You pull it out. You pull it out and you cut it. Right. You've cut it and you pulled it out. So let's see if we can get it out. These are easily replaceable if we ever want to put it back. There we go. There's a bit of a rough way to do it, but that will give us some leeway. Now I'm going to, while I've got it here, I'm going to pull all of this right way into its correct position. And I'm going to do the same chopping deal with the other one. It's going to be a load of stupid noise while I do it because I can't bother to turn the app off and you're still recording. I'm going to cut the thing in probably half-ish again. Again, to get it out high enough to cut it, I'm going to need to pull it out. Come on. So I have the dexterity of a sort of, I don't know, dexterity of a Neanderthal, that's what it feels like. Come on. Get under there. Okay, snapped. And let's pull this one out and do the same. Get under there. Snapped. Sounds a bit harsh, but hey. Now I'm going to pull these two ends out, which will mean uncoiling them with a bit of brute force. If I can get hold of them again. Come on. I've got the right ones. With this one here, come on. Out you come. Right, so it's quite dramatic, but it leaves me with shorter spring and therefore not struggling to compress. What it does do that I'm not quite happy with, which is not ideal at all, is it puts the angle of the strings, the angle that the strings are coming through the body is quite extreme now. It's not fantastic. I'm tuning up now, but I'm going to at least get the correct intonation out of this, so this guitar will play beautifully, and that's the name of the game. So let's get back to where we were. Still take any slack out we can. These strings will be way under too much pressure now. Okay, we'll continue now with the third 3 bass strings. sharp. Again, I can pull it back. I am knowing that it's under quite a strict angle. Maybe that, a little bit more. Okay. Slightly sharp, so could go further even. It's probably now pulling the strings backwards on themselves in the slots, but hey. Very close, a little bit more since we've gone to all this length of removing the spring. It's clear that the bridge is positioned incorrectly. Close. Now, it's the physics of this is telling us that. Now, I know the correct position for the next string in relation to the one we've just done, so I'm going to slacken those both off because they have to do quite a bit of movement to get into the correct staggered position. We've pretty much run out of room altogether on these now, with the strings squashed as far as they'll go. Amazing. Okay, let's do the A. Pretty good. Too. Well, that is quite some extreme adjustment, folks, but there we have it. We've just about made it work. We could make a couple of tiny adjustments now to the action, but the nut's good. Obviously the strings are still bedding in a bit. Thank you, love. Beautiful. strange struggle with a very peculiar positioned bridge. We got it into a nice intonation, and that's spot on. But there you go, that's the peculiarities of guitars. It happens sometimes that you find something that just will not intonate because somewhere along the way they've put this bridge a couple of millimeters in the wrong place. I could probably measure it and see whether that's in fact proven by measurements, but it's not great. So you can see that the physics of the music has told us that to get these into perfect intonation we've had to go way back from where they should be, and in order to do that we've had to cut down the springs, and that's to put right a problem basically made by the manufacturer, or a mistake made by the manufacturer. But it's done, and the basic result is a beautifully intonated in-tune guitar. So folks, thank you for sticking around. That was longer than expected because of those severe intonation problems. Just, you know, you get different things thrown at you different times. Pleased to say that is now in good working nick. But yeah, it took me by surprise, that one. So that's it for the Encore Blaster. Beautiful looking, easy to play now. Light, pretty little white Milky Bar style guitar. But yeah, make an ideal learning guitar now. Beautiful action. 1.25 millimeters at the 22nd fret, which is quite spectacular. All nicely level frets, so whoever gets this will have a nice guitar to play, a nice learner guitar particularly. Okay, thanks for sticking it out with me. I'll see you again for a Sinister Gates heavy rock looking thing, which I need to do at this weekend. And if I get a chance, I'll get a bit of introduction on the Fender Squier Strat Korean made thing, which I think is made of laminate, which would be really interesting. And also the other guitar on my kind of immediate to-do list is a Sun Mustang in red, which is a nice looking thing, and I like those things. So thanks for sticking it out with me. I'm Sam, this is the Relove Guitars Workshop, and it's time to go and get some dinner.